All right, it's 1 o'clock. We're gonna get going now. I'll just stop my screen here. And today we have Wally Chartrant joining us, and he is going to be speaking on the circle of life. I'll hand it over to him in just a minute. Just a couple things before we start. For those that just joined us, we're getting started here. If you can keep your mics muted, it'll just reduce any of the background noise. There will be time at the end for questions. But if you'd like to ask questions as we go, you're welcome to put them into the chat group. And one thing that we do love to see is where everybody is joining us from. So you're welcome to introduce yourself in the chat as well, if you're comfortable, not required. But we're gonna get going. I'm just gonna run into the other room and set up Wally to get going. So thank you for joining us, everybody. It'll just be a minute.
Okay, you're good to go.
We're going to close the door, you said? Yeah. So, good day. Just before we begin in that, just stay where you are in that. I just want to start us off in this way. Bonjour, Tanse. Before I speak to those songs I just sang, I figured a good way for us to begin our circle this afternoon is to start with that cleansing ceremony, that smudge ceremony. But a long time ago, when I was new to that circle, I would see our people, they would bring out those medicines, they would pass them around, light them, pass them around. But because I didn't know too much, because I was new, I would watch and I kind of got the idea that we're inviting something, that we're sending something away. But I never knew why they would use the different medicines they would use in this ceremony. So I always promised myself that if I ever led that circle, that I would take a little bit of time to talk about that medicine before I lit it. So this afternoon we're going to use sage. And one of the teachings that comes with this medicine, it's a woman's medicine, belongs to the women. And it represents three things. Number one, it represents wisdom, because it's the women who carry that wisdom for the nation. Number two, it represents strength, because again, it's the women who are strong for the nation. Anytime that there's a wrong, unjust done to us as Indigenous people, who is always at the front? It's always the women at the front. If you remember back in 1990, Oka, Quebec, they tried to build that golf course over those burial grounds. It was those women that were at the front. A few years ago across Turtle Island, Idle No More. Again, it was those women that were leading at the front. A few years ago here in Manitoba, when that verdict came down not guilty on Tina Fontaine, again, it was those women that marched from the Red River to the ledge. It's always the women at the front, and it's up to us men to support them. So they're the ones that represent that strength. Number three, it also represents clarity or vision, because again, it's the women who have that vision for the nation. So this afternoon, as we take a little bit of time to cleanse that mind, that body, that spirit before we begin, maybe just take a little moment, think about wisdom. Think about it in terms of that road that you've been walking, however long you've been walking your road. Myself personally, I've been walking mine for 59 years now, and a lot of good things have happened, not so good things have happened. But that's up to me to learn, right? That's up to me to learn. That's what we call wisdom. So maybe think about your journey. Right? What have you learned so far that can help you, right? In terms of your own personal journey. And as you think about strength, take a moment and imagine that road that you're walking right now. Right? Whatever that road might look like for you, what kind of strength do you need today to walk your road? Yeah? And again, right now, we're going through together this worldwide pandemic, and things have changed. Things have been tipped over for a lot of us, for most of us, not all of us, right? So, what kind of strength do we need today to continue walking our road? Maybe take a moment, think about that. And as you think about the road ahead, eh, as you think about uh, clarity or vision, imagine yourself that road up ahead of you. eh. Take a moment to imagine yourself 5 years from now, 10, 20, 30 years from now, right? What do you look like? But I'm not talking wrinkles, but what kind of human being do you wish to become? So maybe take a moment and think about that as well. And by us taking that little bit of time to use this medicine in this way, we're also taking a little bit of time to acknowledge, to honor our mothers, our grandmothers, our aunties, our nieces, our daughters, our partners, some of us, right? All women. And that includes those missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, especially their families, right? Who today are still trying to find closure, right? Trying to find answers to what happened to their loved ones. So let's take a little moment to think about them as well. Last thing I want to say before I light this medicine is it's not for us to say that you have to partake, right? And anytime when you're in that circle and people bring out these medicines, you don't have to partake if you don't feel like it. And we don't force anybody, right? And usually the protocol in that, when that bowl comes to us, we usually tap it, right? And that lets that other person know to move on. So that first song I sang for you this just a little while ago in that, I first heard that song at a Sundance many years ago in a community called Saugeen First Nation. It's about an hour north of Winnipeg here. But anyways, when I first heard that song, oh, it touched my heart. I don't know why, but it touched my heart. So when they were giving us a little break, I called over that man that had been singing the song at the big drum. And I offered him some tobacco and I asked if I could, if I could use that song. So he gave me that permission. But anyways, he was telling me that that song, it was given to his family from up west in Alberta somewhere, right? That's where that song originally came from. He was singing it at another gathering in another community called Sioux Valley, just by the Saskatchewan boundary here in Manitoba. And when he was done there, those people in Sioux Valley, they said, "Oh, that's a pretty song. What's the name of that song you just sang?" And he realized that it didn't have a name. So those people there in Sioux Valley, they gave that song a name. So that first song I sang for you this afternoon, today we know that song as the Pepsi Cola song. Eh? But simply, it's a welcome song. It's a welcome song. It's to welcome us into the circle today. And by doing that, I want to welcome each of you as well that have taken that time today to come and sit and to come and listen and to come and share. And again, I just want to welcome all of you. A big shout out to Six Nations in Ontario and all those other ones I saw there that were from Ontario and wherever else you're from in that. Hey, welcome. That second song I sang for you, that song we call a bear song. Yeah, and the words are simple. Manituma kwa kabinagusian. But what we're saying through that song is that we can see those grandmother, grandfather spirits. And when I say grandmother, grandfather spirits, I'm talking about all our ancestors that have already gone ahead of us, right? So we can see that they're walking towards us from all four directions. And as we see them walking towards us, we say to them, Manituma kwa kajeni mishinam, we say to them, come and bless us. Yeah? But it's through that song that we take a little bit of time today before we begin to acknowledge that each and every one of us, we need healing from time to time. Healing in how we think about others, envy, anger, jealousy, how we think about ourselves. Oh, I'm no good. I can never do anything right. I'm not smart. Or else just the way we think about life sometimes, even, right? Why am I even here? What's my purpose anyway? So it's to acknowledge that our minds need that healing from time to time. Our bodies, it too needs that healing from time to time as well. A lot of us, all of us, we all carry illnesses in our bodies, right? Myself personally, I have arthritis in my lower back. I had a heart attack 15 years ago. Diabetes is the number one disease today amongst Indigenous people. So it's through that song that we acknowledge that our bodies also need that healing. And just as much as that mind and that body needs healing, sometimes our spirit, it too needs healing. Right? Because sometimes we can't see that road that we need to be walking, right? Sometimes some of us, we even want to give up on life. Right? So it's through that song that we acknowledge that we all need healing. But also at the same time, just as much as we all need that healing, every one of us that are gathered here today, we also all of us, we all carry that gift. And that's that gift to heal others, right? And sometimes it's how we choose to use our words. When we say kind things, good things, we lift people up, right? Sometimes all it takes is a hug, right? Sometimes maybe just even an ear, right? Even if we don't have the answers, right? We can help somebody else heal a little bit, by listening. So it's through that song that we acknowledge that bear song. That third and final song I sang, that one we call Creator Song. And again, in that song, the words are simple. Do. But it's through that song that we take a little bit of time before we begin to say thank you to those grandmothers and grandfathers, right? Because they're the ones that guide us every day. It's through that song that we take that little bit of time to say thank you to Mother Earth, because she's the one that carries us every day. And it's through that song that we also take that little bit of time to say thank you, we say, to Creator, to God, right? Because it's Creator that watches over all of life. Yeah? So, having said that mouthful of thoughts, welcome, 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 welcome. Yeah? My English name is Wally, and I come from a little community called Mallard, a very tiny, tiny little community right in the middle of Manitoba in our province over here. But that's where I originally come from. I left there many years ago. In 1977 is when I left my community. But when I look back on my community, I think about what's it famous for. And one of the things I think about right away in that is I always think about Christmas, being that it's winter right now and we just passed the Christmas season. But anyways, between Christmas and New Year's in my little community, all the women would cook. They would cook and cook and cook all kinds of foods and that, and all kinds of dainties, cakes, and pies. But anyways, on New Year's Day, every year on New Year's Day, to begin the new year, we'd all go from house to house to house eating. And that's a fond memory that I have from my community, my childhood. And obviously, as a child, I always went for the cakes and the pies and so forth, right? So I believe, at least in my mind, that my community is famous in that way. Um, One other thing that it might be famous for is if you watched the Olympics a few winters ago, right? We saw our first Anishinaabe Quet, right? Our first Indigenous woman hockey player playing for Team Canada, Bridget Laquette. Her dad comes from my little community where I grew up as well. So it might be, famous in that kind of little way too as well. But anyways, that's where I originally come from. My kuku, my great grandmother, raised me. Uh, and shared a lot of traditional stories and teachings with me in that, which I still carry today. And some of them I'll share with you the next little while that we're together. Um, I'm a father of 8 children. My oldest, he's 42. My baby, she's 15, and I got a whole bunch in between there as well. I'm also a grandfather to 6 children as well. My background professionally is child welfare. That's where I began back in 1985. So I've been doing that for a little bit. And currently I work at an organization here in Winnipeg called Mama Wichita Center. It's a family resource center. But anyways, that's been my professional background, if that's what you want to call that, over the years. What else could I share with you? Maybe one last thing. When I was a little boy, my dream of when I grew up was that I wanted to be very much, I wanted to be a cowboy. That's what I wanted to be when I grew up. And the reason for that, I believe, is I grew up in the 60s, and some of you may relate to this. But, anyways, growing up in the 60s, when you turned on the TV, that there'd be a good chance that you'd see a Western. So I grew up with John Wayne, Gene Autry, Gunsmoke Bonanza, those types of shows. But anyways, I used to notice something watching that little black and white TV at my cuckoo's house. And what I used to notice is that these cowboys, they'd ride into these Indian villages with their rifles, their six shooters, pow, 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 and all the damn Indians would be dead. So I got it into my head very early that I didn't want to be a loser, right? I didn't want to be a loser. So I believe that's part of why I wanted to be a cowboy. Simply, I didn't want to be a loser. But anyways, in 1979, when I was 17 years old, I walked into the convention center here in Winnipeg, and I walked in there with 500 Anishinaabe dancers on that floor. I looked up into the stands, another 5,000 brown faces in the stands. And I remember that day very clearly, very clearly. And the reason I remember that day very clearly is because that day when I was 17 years old, walking into that environment, my heart, it traveled from my chest into my throat when I realized who I was, that I was a Anishinaabe, and that was okay to be a Anishinaabe. So since that day, moving forward, I've never again wanted to be a cowboy. Yeah? So that's a little bit about me in terms of who I am, where does I come from. Um, Anishinaabe, the old people, they tell us, "Mejeka." When we tell a story, we never start our stories with once upon a time, right? Because us, we don't tell fairy tales. Right? To us, our stories are real. But anyways, Kichimenjek a long time ago, the people, they came together. They came together for that ceremony of ceremonies. We call that ceremony the dance of life. Today we know it as a Sundance ceremony. But anyways, in that ceremony, us men, we had a responsibility. And in that ceremony, the women, they too had a responsibility. The men's responsibility was to go into the forest, go and cut down that mitiganabe, that tree of life that they would erect at the center of that ceremony. The men's responsibility also was to go and cut those trees that they would use to build that lodge where they would have that ceremony. The women's responsibility was to go into the forest and peel the bark off those trees that they would use to tie that lodge together. Their responsibility also was to prepare the feast food that they would all share as part of that ceremony. So as the men were going off to go and get that Meteganabe, the little boys, they came following the men. Those men turned to those boys and said, "You little boys, you're going to be in the way. We have lots to do. Go play." And they shooed them away. As the women too were making their preparations, those little girls, they came following those women. Those girls turned around and asked, "What are you doing, little girls? We're coming to help you," they said. "No, no, you little girls. We have lots to do, very little time. You're going to be in the way. Go play." And again, they shooed them away. Sure enough, those men, they brought out that Matiganabe, they dressed it up and they erected it and they built that lodge, tying it together with the bark that the women had brought. A huge feast was prepared outside that lodge. All those women gathered around, all the men on the other side. They were just about ready to have that last feast before that ceremony began. When all those little girls, the little boys, they came squeezing in between the adults. But once again, somebody turned to those children and said, "You children, this food, this water, that's for the dancers. Don't you realize that they're going to give up this food, this water, so the rest of us can have life? You kids can wait a little while longer, go and play." And again, they shooed them out. Sure enough, after everybody had their fill, all those women come filing in, all the men on the other side, a big, huge drum with some men sitting around. They were just about ready to start that ceremony when all the little girls come filing in, all the little boys on the other side. But once again, somebody turned to those children and said, "You children, this is a very sacred ceremony. This is no place for you to be running around, fooling around. You guys can go and do that. Go play at the camp," they said. And again, they shooed them out. Sure enough, that big drum had started. Those women on their side, the men on that side, with their eagle whistle. 4 days and 4 nights they danced and they prayed to that tree of life. Finally, on the fourth day, as that ceremony was coming to an end, a huge feast was prepared outside that lodge once again. All those women come filing out, all the men on the other side. They were just about ready to start that celebration when they realized that the kids weren't there, the children weren't there. "Ah, we can't have the celebration without them. They must be at the camp." Sure enough, somebody ran to the camp. They come running back and reported that there were no children at the camp. So of course this alarmed the adults. "Well, we can't have the celebration without them. We gotta find them." So sure enough, in those four directions they started to search, some in the forest, some in the field. This man came to this hill, and as he started to climb that hill, he could hear a very faint drum. It got louder and louder and louder as he got higher. Finally, he got to the top of that hill. Just on the other side, this small little Mitiganaba, this small little lodge, small little drum with some little boys sitting there, little girls, little boys on this side with their small little eagle whistles. And that's the way that story is told. And we all take different meaning from that story. One of the most common meanings we take in that is that we need to involve our children, right? That we need to involve our children. But one of the other ways I take that story as well too is aren't we all creators' children, right? And if so, then all of this belongs to all of us. Yeah? And that's why I believe as Indigenous people, we share what's under Mother Earth, we share what's on top Mother Earth, we share what's above Mother Earth, because we know she doesn't just belong to us. And the same is true of our teachings, right? Our knowledge of those medicines, those songs that we sing, right? Those ceremonies, right? We share those, right? Because again, we know that they don't just belong to us. Now, the only unfortunate thing about sharing sometimes is sometimes somebody will come and they'll take that and they'll go and twist it all up, right? And what I mean by that is sometimes I'll walk into a store here in Winnipeg, right? Sweetgrass, 7.95. Sage, half price today, 4.50, right? And that's unfortunate. Sometimes we see that, right? Because what do they cost them, right? Possibly a little bit of tobacco, right? Now they're filling their pockets, right? And that's unfortunate, right? I don't know if you remember. Some of you might remember, like about 10 years now, maybe this guy in Sedona, Arizona. He must have came to one of our ceremonies up that way somewhere in that, right? So he got it into his head. So what did he do? He built this big structure, sweat-like structure, and he crammed some 60 people in there. Three of those people ended up dying, right? And he called it personal growth experience. Right? But he was charging them 10,000 bucks a head, right? And again, when we hear those things, again, that's unfortunate, right? It's unfortunate that we see and we hear those things, right? But regardless, we still share. Right? The old people, they tell us on the darkest, clearest of nights, you look up there and you count those hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of stars, right? They say that's how many teachings there are in those circle of life teachings. Some people know them as medicine wheel teachings. So this afternoon, I thought I would share a little bit of those teachings with you. And part of why I only share a little bit is because I only know a little bit, right? Imagine how wise I'd be if I knew all of this, right? So today I thought I would share some of those teachings with you. Anishinaabe, the old people, they tell us life begins right here. Okay? And that's these first 9 grandfathers over here outside the circle. And what those represent is that first 9 months in our mother's womb. Yeah? Make a long time ago, they say there was teachings here for those men ready to be fathers, those women ready to be mothers. And there was teachings on both sides here, right? To ensure that this part of that journey would be good, right? So what I mean by that is that man, right? Maybe his father would take him aside, his grandfather, maybe even his uncle would take him aside. And he was told all those things that he would need to do during this period over here. So for example, you might have been told, what to say and how to say that, what not to say to her, right? So he was told all those things, how to provide for her, how to protect her, even how to love her during this period over here. All for the sake that this part of that journey would be good. Her too, her mother, her grandma, maybe her auntie would take her aside. And she too would be told all those things that she would need to do during this period over here. So, for example, maybe she might have been told, drink lots of white fish broth soup. And the reason for that was so that that little brain that was developing inside that little baby, right, would develop even faster. Right? So before there was even books on child development, we knew the importance of helping that little brain develop already, right? And that was one of the ways we would do that. Omega 3s they call it, right? So we would let, they would encourage that mom to drink lots of white fish broth soup. Maybe she might have been encouraged, drink lots of um, uh, raspberry tea. Yeah? And the reason for that was that when it was time to deliver over here, she'd be that much stronger. Yeah? And the baby would be that much stronger as well. Yeah? Because again, part of the journey sometimes can be very difficult, not only for her, but also for that little one as well. Yeah? So again, those old people knew that. So that it was important that that mom stay strong. And that was one of the ways that they would encourage that by drinking lots of white fish broths, raspberry tea. So she was told what she could bring into her body, what not to bring in during this period over here, all for the sake that this part of the journey would be good. She was told, yeah, you can walk over there while you're carrying, but don't walk over there maybe. Yeah? She was told which ceremony she could still attend while she carried and which one she shouldn't maybe. Yeah? Back home where I come from, when a woman is carrying, she's discouraged. Yeah? She's discouraged from attending a wake. Yeah, when somebody's passed on, right? She maybe is discouraged, and maybe you shouldn't go there. Maybe you shouldn't attend that, right? Or else when we have that funeral, again, she may get, she may be discouraged. Maybe you shouldn't go there either, right? And the reason for that was that the belief is that that spirit is just leaving, right? But sometimes when those spirits are leaving, sometimes they invite other spirits too, right? So that was a way eh, to protect that little one, right? But anyways, there was teachings here for men, teachings here for women as well. These next 7 grandfathers right here, these red ones that you see in front of you, This one here is that first stage of life after we come out of our mother's womb. We call this stage the childhood stage, right? That's what we call it. Yeah? But again, Chinese, the old people, they don't call it that. Yeah? This one over here, they call that stage of great learning. Because everything we learn here prepares us the rest of that way over there. Right? So I remember picking up this book at a library one day. Yeah? Everything you wanted to know about life, you learned from kindergarten. Made a lot of sense, that book, right? Because this is where we first learned to be in relationship, yeah? How to share, right? Our toys, maybe. Yeah? How to problem solve when we're not wanting to share our toys, right? All those things we learn here prepares us the rest of that journey over there. But again, Mejeka, a long time ago, there was teachings right from here, for those little boys. There was teachings here for those little girls. There was teachings right from here for the two spirit. Yeah? There was teachings here all along the way as well. Yeah? So, for example, one of the very, very, very first teachings that we all experience is that moment we're born. Yeah? And that's that teaching of loss and grief. Yeah? That's the very, very first teaching we all experience. So if you imagine, what does a baby do as soon as they're born? Yeah? They cry. Yeah? They cry, right? And the old people tell us that's because they're experiencing loss and they're grieving their mother's womb, right? Because if you think about it, we've been in here for that first part of our journey. Everything we can possibly need and want, we're safe, right? All our food is being given to us, so, and it's nice and warm and comfortable, right? So then all of a sudden, just like that, we come into this world where it's cold, everything is blurry, noises are muffled, it's scary, right? So what do? We cry, but they tell us that's that first teaching, that experience of loss and grief. So we all get to experience that right from day one, right from that first minute we're born. And throughout our journey, we may experience loss and grief many times as well. But this is what prepares us most times, right? Is that very first experience. So after we're born, maybe about a week or so later, that little cord in our belly button, it falls off of us, right? But those old people, they wouldn't take that cord and simply throw it in the garbage. Mick, a long time ago, there was a ceremony for that. Back home where I come from, they would take that cord, they would go into the bush, they would find a tree that had fallen, and on that stump, they would put that cord along with their tobacco. And they would say those prayers, all because they wanted that child to always know where they're going in life. Because the belief was that if we just threw it in the garbage, that we would go through life like this, they say, looking for a belly button. That's what the old people would tell us, right? So, anyways, I've done that ceremony 8 times now, right, in my journey, right? When anytime my children, when their cords fell off, I would go into the bush and I would go and find a stump and I would put it there along with my tobacco and I would say those prayers. Because as a father, I always want my children to know where they're going in life. Yeah? And if for whatever reasons any of my children should ever come to me today and say to me, Dad, I'm feeling lost, here's what I can do, right? I can take them by the hand, I can lead them into the forest, and I can say, that's where I put it right here, to show them, right? But part of that other teaching that came with that is by us placing that cord on the land and near where our child was born, right? Eventually, that cord became part of Mother Earth. Yeah? And what that did for our children is it created roots for them. Yeah? And again, that's an important thing as parents that we need to teach our children where their roots are, the community from which they come. Anytime I meet somebody new, regardless where, that's usually the first question I'll ask. Where are you from? Where are you from? Because to me, that's important. Yeah? Because that's where all our roots are. Yeah? That community from which we come. Hmm? So that's why I always ask that question. Yeah? But anyways, that was important a long time ago. When that baby maybe is a month old or so, that mother, she would take that baby and she'd wrap it up in a moss bag, right? And there'd be a little board that she would tie that to. She would take that baby in that moss bag and that, right? That cradle, and she'd stand that baby up. Tiganagan, we call it, right? But as soon as she would do that, right, now all of a sudden her hands are free, right, to look after the rest of her family. Right? Whatever other responsibilities she had within her home, now her hands were free to do that. Okay? And once in a while she would look over and baby's right there, safe and sound, right? But the other teaching that comes with that Tiganagan is the idea that, when we're all born, none of us are born with what they call fine motor skills, right? None of us are born with that. You see babies, they're like that, right? They can't control their arms, their hands, or anything. But anyways, if you imagine now that that baby is all tied up, right, inside that moss bag, and is on that Tiganagan, right? They're all like this. Now all they have is their eyes and their ears, right? Child development, right? That was our way again to give that baby that head start, right? That head start, to develop their brain quickly. Yeah? Again, before there were books, we knew that. We knew the importance of that. Yeah? By the time that baby maybe is just over a year old, that baby learns how to walk. Yeah? But before they would let that baby go and run around on Mother Earth, they would have another ceremony. Yeah? And that one we call that walking out ceremony, right? But the reason for that ceremony or the importance of that ceremony, it was to teach that little one. Right? Now take a moment and think about this, right? When that child was 1 year old, we already started teaching that child that first sacred teaching, right? Respect. Right? We need to respect her, right? Something unfortunately we don't do enough today as parents, right? And to prove my point in that, all we have to do is open a paper in the morning, somebody took somebody's life again, right? Because our young ones, they're growing up not respecting life. Maybe they haven't been taught this, right? But again, long time ago, that was important, right? It was important to pass that on to our children, right? So that they would grow up being respectful, right? Not only to Mother Earth, but all the animal beings as well, right? And especially our elders. Right? That was one of the ways I grew up anyway, in my community. That was something that was drilled into my brain, my heart, to be respectful to those elders, right? So I learned that very early. I learned that very early in life. But again, that's why that ceremony was important to us a long time ago as Indigenous people. But anyways, there was teachings there all along the way for those little boys, those little girls, right? And again, those two spirits as well. One of the things I just want to say in regards to the two spirit, a long time ago in our cultures, those two spirits were medicine people. They had very strong medicine, very, very strong medicine. And it was important for us to acknowledge that medicine because they walked on both sides of that trail, right? So in that way, they had a lot of knowledge, right? And we recognized that long time ago. And unfortunately, because of society and everything else in that, we've forgotten that as well. And we mock them. We discriminate against them today in our communities and so forth, right? Um, but again, there was teachings here. Well, we would have learned those things early because I know I did anyway. eh. One of the persons that used to babysit me, my bestest babysitter, if that's what you want to call a person, right, was a two-spirited person. eh. And I loved, spending that time with him and being in that company and watching and observing. But again, we would have learned all those things over here. That next stage of life over here, we call that one the teenage stage, right? Adolescent stage. Kichanishnabek, they don't call it that. This one over here, they call the fast life. Because when we get over here at 12 or 13, maybe, We want to be over there. Eh? Can't tell me what to do, right? I'll dress the way I want. Eh? I'll pick my own friends. Eh? Oh, don't worry, I'll go to bed when I want. I'll get up, don't worry about it, right? But anyways, I remember being in that fast life as well in terms of my own personal journey. Because I remember back being around 12 or so in that, sometimes I'd go into Dauphin with my Coco, my great grandmother, right? And if I was really, really lucky, sometimes she'd walk me into Woolworth store and I'd walk out with a brand new pair of jeans, right? And first thing when I got home, I'd run into the kitchen, I'd open the drawer, take the scissors out, eh, designer jeans. Eh? Us, we used to make our own, right? Today we go into a store, what, 300-400 bucks today, right? But us, we used to make our own. But anyways, I remember walking around back home, 12, 13 years old with my designer jeans, right? No long johns underneath, my little white t-shirt, my little jean jacket. Eh? At least I was cool, because I knew it all already, right? I knew it all already. But that's what they mean, that fast life. And that's this stage over here, these white grandfathers. But again, Mejek Kamik a long time ago, there was teachings here for those boys ready to be men, those girls ready to be women. And again, for those two spirit as well, ready to be adults, right? There was teachings here all along for them as well. So for example, when that boy maybe was 12 or 13 years old, they would take him away from his village to a very special area outside their village somewhere. And they would go and leave him there overnight, maybe 2 nights, maybe even up to 4 nights, without food, without water. All in the hopes that while he was there fasting, right, that he would have a dream, a vision. And in that vision, his spirit guide would come to him, his helper would come to him. And that's the one that would take him the rest of that way over there. By the time that boy was maybe 14 or 15, he already would have belonged to one of the societies within that community in which he grew, whether that was the hunting society, maybe the medicine society, maybe even the Ogichita society, the warrior society. Whatever societies that that community had, depending upon his gifts, his talents, he would be invited to be, you know, a part of one of those societies. Something unfortunately we don't do enough today again, in our own communities, right? Because what do we do with our youth today? You're in the way. You're in the way. We push them to the side somewhere. And then at the end of the day, we end up wondering like, why are they so messed up? Why is our youth so messed up, right? Well, maybe that has something to do with it, right? Because we don't give them a place within our family, within our community. We don't give them that purpose anymore, right? But again, long time ago, there was teachings for that, right? And that was one of the ways we would do that. I remember back home again, growing up in my little community, as far as I could remember growing up, my Coco, she'd send me down the road to go and help uh, grandmother Pauline, and this old lady that lived alone. She lived alone and that her husband had passed away already many years prior, and she was getting up in age. But my Coco would send me over there to go and haul water for her, or to bring in wood for her. And it gave me purpose, right? It gave me purpose really early on, made me feel good. And sometimes, Cuckoo Pauline and that, after I'd come and bring wood or haul water inside and that, she'd sit me at the kitchen table, give me some tea and maybe some biscuits or cookies or something, right? It made me feel good, made me feel good. And sometimes we'd have that conversation and I'd learn things from her as well. So again, that's why that was important, to give our youth, again, a place within our families, a place within our community. But anyways, there was teachings here all along the way. And again, the same is true for those girls. Obviously, I can't share some of those teachings because I'm not a woman, right? But there was teachings here for them as well. That next stage of life over here, these yellow grandfathers, those ones represent that adult stage. That's that adult stage. But again, Chanishnaabek, they don't call it that. And this one over here, they call that stage of great responsibility. Because it's when we get over here somewhere, that's when we're supposed to come together with that other person. But with that comes responsibility, right? I don't know about you, but I remember, you know what, the first time I ever fell in love, oh, I could not eat, I could not sleep for about a week or two. Yeah? I just wanted to spend 24/7 with her. Yeah? But then after about a week or two, I started eating again, I started sleeping again. So what I noticed was that love, yeah, starts wearing off a little bit, right? It starts wearing off a little bit. Yeah? But now this is where responsibility kicks in. Now I got to nurture that love. I got to take care of that love, right? Just like a flower, right? I got to take care of it. Yeah? Like that's what we call responsibility. Yeah? Friday night, the guys come knock on the door. Come on, let's go play hockey. I can't just jump up and walk out the door. No, I've got responsibility, right? I gotta ask. I gotta ask because maybe she has, other plans for us, right? But that's what we call responsibility. Yeah? And after a while, we'll walk like that. Things are going pretty good. So now what do we do? So now we start inviting. Yeah? We invite that new life, right? The next thing we know, we got that little one, yeah? Totally, totally dependent upon us, right? To feed it, to clothe it, to nurture, to protect, to love, responsibility, right? But that's why they call this one that stage of great responsibility. But again, long time ago, Mejekamik, we would have learned what those roles and responsibilities were. Yeah? Even before we became adults, right? We would have learned what those roles and responsibilities were. Yeah? And again, I go back to the idea about, hauling water, hauling wood for that elder down the road from us, right? That was showing me, yeah, that, when I became of age over here somewhere, that I would have responsibilities, right? And the same is with girls in there. In a lot of our families, especially big families in that, right? There was always those older girls that would help look after the other kids, the younger kids, right? Again, preparing them, right? Preparing them. So that's why I'm saying we would have learned all those roles and responsibilities over here somewhere already. Yeah? But that's this stage over here, that stage of great responsibility. That last stage over here, yeah, which is these blue grandfathers, this one here we call that elder stage. Yeah? But again, Kichenishnaabek, they don't call it that. This one over here, they call that stage of great wisdom. And the reason for that is because when you think about it, you've traveled all the way from here and you've experienced all those things that life has to offer you. And by the time you get over here somewhere, you have that wealth of knowledge, right? So now you become a teacher. Yeah? It's up to you to pass some of that knowledge on. Yeah? But again, Mejekamek a long time ago, we would have learned how to do that, when to do that. Yeah? We would have learned all those things over here somewhere already, yeah? Early on, yeah? When the appropriate time would be. Yeah? One of the things growing up in my little community that I always looked forward to in that was any time any elders came to visit. Yeah? We were told, we were told, to listen. Yeah? Anytime those elders would come in my kuku, she'd always feed them, and that's what we always did, right? We always feed visitors. Yeah? But after they would be fed in that, and we'd all sit around in the living room area, whatever. Us kids would be on the floor, and those elders they'd share teaching, they'd share stories, right? And that was our TV growing up as a child. I remember, right? And how glued I would be to every word, yeah? Because it was through their words that again, we could create that picture in our head, right? In our head, But anyways, that's this stage over here, that elders. These grandfathers down the center here and that, these ones represent those two roads that we all can walk, right? This first road right here, we call that road Minoprimati we call it the good life. Yeah? And when we're walking this road, part of this road and that is when we practice those seven sacred teachings that we all hear about: love, respect, honesty, humility, courage, wisdom, and truth. When we walk in that way, they tell us we're walking upon this road right here. That other road over here, this one we call Machimikan. Yeah, we call it the bad road, right? Because this is that road we walk when we abuse alcohol, when we abuse drugs, family violence, lying, stealing, cheating. They say when we're walking that way, we're walking upon this road right here. But again, Anishinaabe, the old people, they remind us quickly, and just as there's teachings on this road, there's also teachings on this road. eh? And it's up to us to try and find those teachings. So, for example, that alcohol, that's a medicine. eh? Heroin is a medicine. Cocaine is a medicine. Anything that comes from the earth is a medicine. But what happens when we don't respect that medicine? It can come back to hurt us. eh? And that's what we see today in our families, in our communities, is that people haven't respected those medicines. eh? And because we haven't respected them, now our families are hurting. Now our communities are hurting. eh? But it's up to us. It's up to us to find those teachings. And again, to teach those ones that are coming behind us as well. So that hopefully when they get over here somewhere for whatever reasons, that they'll have that knowledge already. That's a medicine. I need to respect that medicine. So that's this road over here. To walk around this circle, to walk completely around this circle, they tell us it takes 100 years, 100 years to walk completely around. So this first half over here, of these grandfathers over here, the first half, this represents that sweat ceremony, or mother's womb. That's what this represents, right? But anyway, sitting in the lodge and that, I was asking one time, because everything has teachings, everything represents something. So sitting in the lodge one time many years ago, I was asking this elder, and so what does these willows represent inside the lodge, right? And that elder responded, well, that's our mother's ribs. That's her ribs, right? That's what those are represent. Okay, good. But anyway, sitting in the lodge, I also noticed that there was 4 rings. Most times in any other lodges I've gone to, there's usually 4 rings inside those lodges too. So I asked one time in that, well, what does those ones represent? And that's these next 4 grandfathers right here. So what I was told in that is that they represent those 4 levels of life. That first level is that physical level, nongum we say today, right? That physical level right here. That second level, that's that spirit level, right? Some people know it as heaven. That's that second level. So when we're done here, we go into that next level over here. But that elder said, beyond that, there's 2 more levels. There's 2 more levels, even beyond that level right there. I don't know what these teachings are because I haven't asked yet. But that's what that elder said. They're those rings. They represent those 4 levels of life. But one of the things I've also learned in that is when we're inside that ceremony, when we're having a ceremony, that at that very same moment, our relatives, they too are having a ceremony. And that's what this other half represents, is that other lodge. All those relatives that have gone ahead of us, when we have a ceremony today, they too are having a ceremony. And in that lodge, it too has 4 rings. And that's these next 4 grandfathers right here. And what those ones represent is they say to get into this level right here today, we've had to come from that other level. We've already traveled 4 levels already, they say. We've already traveled 4 levels to get into this physical level. And to understand that teaching, we don't have to look very far. All we have to do is look at our little ones, right? Because I remember when my kids, when they were much younger, right? I'd walk by the bedroom and they'd be playing away, talking away, laughing away, sometimes even arguing away. And I'd go and check and they're by themselves. But our little ones, they can still see that imaginary friend, right? They can still see who they're playing with, especially at that age, right? Because they're still connected. They're still connected from that other level. This elder was sharing one time in that, and this family, they were out on the land, right? A mom, a dad, their 9-year-old daughter. They had a brand new little girl about 2 weeks old. Every evening, just as that sun would go down and that little girl, she'd come to her mom or dad. Can I have some time alone with my sister? I want to talk to her. And they would give her permission. But after many evenings of that little girl coming to us with that same request, those parents, they became curious. What does she need that time alone for? What is she talking to her sister about? So after giving her one permission one evening, they followed her and they peeked at her inside the teepee. They saw her bending over her little sister, and they could hear, "Hmm? Sister, tell me one more time. Tell me one more time. What does Creator look like? Because I'm starting to forget." Hmm? And it's us that have forgotten what Creator looks like. Okay? But those little ones, they still see Creator. Right? They still have that connection, right? Because they just traveled from that other level. So if it takes 100 years to walk around this circle, and if there's four levels of life, right? And we've already traveled four levels, well, what travels at 8 times? Yeah? What travels at 8 times? Yeah? And that's that last grandfather here. Yeah? It's this one right here, that spirit, right? That's the one that travels all 8 times. Yeah? If you've ever met with somebody in that, we see that a lot in our young people, for example. We'll listen to them, we'll watch them, and then somehow, we'll say, oh, that person has an old spirit, we'll say, right? They have so much wisdom for their age. Yeah? That's because their spirit has already traveled. Eh? It's been a while for already. It's been around for a while, right? But this is the one we neglect the most, is that spirit, right? Because we're always constantly feeding this one up here. All of us woke up this morning in that, and one of the first thoughts we may have had is, I wonder what the weather is going to be like. Okay? Because that's going to determine how we're going to dress today, right? Oh, what am I supposed to be doing today? Oh, yeah, I got to get to that appointment. Oh, yeah, I got that Zoom thing later this noon. Wonder what that'll be about, right? So we're always constantly feeding the mind. Yeah? Some of us, we open the paper, what's happening in the world today? Right from the time we wake up to the time we go to bed, we're always constantly feeding that mind. And the same is true with the body, right? This morning when you woke, what's the first thing you did? You cleaned it, right? You groomed it, you dressed it. Yeah? And throughout the day, we'll feed it. Sometimes we'll even exercise it, right? We're always constantly feeding the body as well. But the one we neglect the most is that spirit. Yeah? But that's the one that travels all 8 times around that circle. Another example, to kind of illustrate that as well. Many years ago, in that I went to New Zealand, and we were welcomed onto a marae by the Maori people out there. And they have a very unique custom, tradition in that when they have visitors, that they go through this protocol of welcoming them onto their marae, their sacred ground. And so we were told in that we couldn't just walk right in, and that there'd be protocols for that. So we waited at the gate, and there was a bit of a field to where the marae was. And this young man, he started to approach us, and he did the haka, which is the sticking out of the tongue and making all these eye gestures and all that, right? And as he got to us and that in front of us while doing the haka, he, from behind him, he pulled out a fern, and he laid it on the ground in front of us, and the host that we were with indicated that we should pick that up to show that we're coming as friends and not foes. And so we picked up that fern, and he took us the rest of the way. But anyways, we were on one side, and all the Maori people, elders, women, children, men, they were all on one side as well. And after we got into our position, they started to sing to us in Maori, right? They sang to us in Maori, in their own indigenous language. And once they were done, however many songs they sang, the elders within that group, they then spoke to us. Our little delegation from Canada here, they all spoke to us one by one in that. But they spoke to us in Maori, in their own language, and not a word of English, but in their own language. So our host, when they were done, indicated that the protocol was that it was our turn to sing to them, and it was our turn to speak to them, and that we would be encouraged to speak in our own language as well. So we sang some songs to them in that, and I was chosen to speak in my language, in my Ojibwe, and I spoke back to them in my own language. And after that was done, we all started intermingling and we had a feast. We call it tea, right? But we had a feast and that and visiting and so forth. But anyways, one of the elders took me aside a little bit later and he explained to me, he said, you know what? He said, when we're doing that ceremony and when we sang to you and when we spoke to you, he said, you probably didn't understand a word, he said. Right? Because I can tell you, he said, because when you sang to me, he said, and when you spoke to us, he said, I did not understand the word either. But he said, my spirit, my spirit understood every song. My spirit understood every word you spoke. He said, this is yours. Yeah? But that speaks to that spirit, right? The age of that spirit, because our spirit, they know all those languages, they know all those customs already. They've been around already for a while. Yeah? But that's what this last grandfather represents. So before I speak about this grandfather over here, I also have in front of me those four sacred medicines. Yeah? So I thought I would do a quick little teaching with you with each of them as well. So that first medicine I already shared with you, it's that sage medicine, and it represents those women, right? And it represents three things, which is wisdom, strength, and clarity. Yeah? But this is that medicine. Yeah? This is the woman's medicine here. And anytime we use this medicine, or at least anytime I use it, I always take time also to think about those murdered, missing Indigenous women and girls. Yeah? I know a few of them. Yeah? I also know some of those families, and one of my own relatives is among those missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. So I always take that time to acknowledge them every time I use this medicine. So that's that sage medicine. One of the things you're going to find in the Anishinaabe culture and in Indigenous culture, right, is that depending on where you are, where you come from, where you go in that, everybody has different teachings. Yeah? And some people will question that sometimes, but my answer always in that is, you know what, that's good, that's awesome, right? Because this teaching eh, is not necessarily to say, oh, this is the right teachings and those ones are wrong, or those ones are the right ones and these ones are wrong. Everybody has different teachings, right? All of us have those different teachings. And one of the best ways I look at this is I always ask people not take away what you like, leave what you don't like. Oh,
2 o'clock.
all right, sure. So we're going to take a little break, I guess. How long do we take? 5? All right, let's take a little 5-minute break. Stretch whatever in that. Go and take care of our lungs if we need to, that kind of thing. But then we'll come back and we'll finish this up. You got you.
Hi everyone, just a couple notes before before we get going again, while you're on your break, just a reminder to keep your mic muted. Also, I put into the chat a link to our video library on our Inish Corporation website. Everyone's welcome to join or to browse some of our past recording sessions. Today's session will be available, usually takes a day or so, so maybe after the weekend. It's just because it's such a large file, it takes a bit to upload. But yeah, our recordings are usually available in a business day or two, and you can go back and rewatch. There was some issues with the volume, so I'm gonna go try to fix that. But yeah, I just wanted to let you know about our website, and you can watch today's session later on.
All right, we're back. Computer, okay.
We can go?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Welcome back. I realize that sometimes when I speak in a very low voice. So I do apologize for that. I'll try and be conscious of speaking just a little tiny bit louder. But anyways, before our break, you know what, just to very quickly recap, these first 9 grandfathers, that first 9 months in our mother's womb, right? These next 7 grandfathers over here, that first stage of life, the childhood stage, but us, we call it that stage of great learning, everything we need to learn about life that prepares us the rest of the way, we learn over here somewhere. That next stage, the adolescent stage, teenage years, they don't call it that. They call it that state, that fast life. Yeah? Because when we get over here, we want to be over there. Can't tell me what to do. That next stage of life over here, the adult stage, that's that stage of great responsibility, we call it, because this is where we come together with that other person. This is where we bring that new life. But with that comes great responsibility. These last 7 grandfathers over here, they represent that elder stage. But again, we call it that stage of great wisdom, because when you think about it, you've traveled here and all over here and learning all those things. By the time we get there, we have that wealth of knowledge. Now we become the teacher. These grandfathers down the 2 centers here, that Minope Madazin, the good life, that's when we practice those 7 sacred teachings. Majimikana, we call it the bad road. This is when we abuse alcohol, drugs, family violence, lying, stealing, cheating. We're walking upon that road. But just as there's teachings on this road, there's also teachings on that road too. It's up to us to learn what those teachings are. To walk around that circle takes 100 years. That there's 4 levels of life, and that there's another 4 levels that we've already traveled. So that's kind of where we're at. And before we took a little break, I also shared with you that, again, that teaching around sage. One of the things I do when I share with people is I'm very repetitive. And the reason for that is sometimes it takes, us her hearing something maybe 2, 3, maybe 4 times, right? Before it kind of sticks to us. Right? So that's part of why I get repetitive a little bit when I'm talking with people. So anyways, that second medicine I just wanted to share with you, a short teaching on, is that cedar medicine. Yeah? That cedar medicine. And one of the teachings that comes with this medicine, that's one of those protection medicines. This one right here. Yeah? This is that medicine we use to take away negativity and to invite positiveness back. Yeah? Negativity in our thinking, the way we think about others, ourselves, about life. Negativity in our bodies, sometimes negativity in our spirit. This medicine here, we can chew it and we can eat it. And sometimes we'll burn it and we'll smudge with it, right? Or else sometimes we'll boil it into a tea and we'll drink it. Yeah? But this is that medicine we use for that. So when my kids, when they were much younger, sometimes 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, they'd come running in the room. Dad, 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 I had a bad dream. So what do? I get up, I take a little bit of cedar, I might put it under their bed, maybe under their pillow, or else maybe by their windowsill, or else maybe by their door. Because as a father, I want my children to be able to sleep good at night, right? And that's one of the ways I would use this medicine. Today, my children are much older. Today, sometimes they'll get a cold or a flu, but instead of asking for Tylenol or cough syrup, Dad, can you make us some cedar tea? So I'll take a handful, put it in a pot, a metal pot with some water. I'll put it on the stove, turn the element on, and after about 10, 15 minutes of boiling, that water kind of goes from greenish to brown. Usually that's when it's ready. I'll take that cedar leaves off of that water and I'll go put them outside by a tree with my tobacco and I'll say a little prayer for my children's health and well-being. And my kids, they'll drink that next day. They're okay again, kind of thing, right? But that's one of the ways we use that medicine. If you've ever been into a lodge, a sweat ceremony, right? Every time they bring in a grandfather, those rocks that are heated in the fire, every time they bring in a grandfather into that lodge, one of the first medicines that usually they'll sprinkle is a little bit of cedar on each grandfather when they come into that lodge. And the reason for that is that we're acknowledging that we're going to let go of all that negativity inside that ceremony. But by letting go, we don't want anybody else to get hit by it, right? So that's one of the ways we would use that cedar inside the lodge to ensure that nobody gets hurt by whatever's being released. If you've ever gone to a powwow, right? Most times when you go to a powwow today, especially if there's shunya, money involved, right? Good chance that maybe 6, 7 out of every 10 dancers, they probably have a little bit of cedar inside their magazines when they're dancing, right? And the reason for that is because lots of money involved sometimes, lots of shunya, right? Somebody might come along, throw something on the ground, dancer will come, they'll step on that. Next thing you know, they got cramps, right? They're out of competition. Yeah? So that's one of the ways we use this medicine as a protection medicine. Yeah? And sometimes when we create a tobacco tie in our home, some of us will include that cedar in there and we'll tie that tobacco tie maybe in the 4 corners, the 4 directions of our home, right? But that's one of the ways we use this medicine right here, that cedar medicine. That third medicine we use is right here, that asema we call it, that tobacco, right? And with this one, there comes 2 teachings with tobacco. The first teaching is anytime we ask for something, we always offer that tobacco, right? When we ask for something. Maybe we need a ceremony, right? We go and find that person that can offer us that ceremony. No, how have you been meaning? I've come to offer you this, right? Or else maybe we had a dream. Maybe that dream is not making sense to us. Maybe it's bothering us, right? Again, we'll go and find that person that might be able to interpret that dream for us. No, how have you been meaning? I've come to offer you that tobacco. Or else maybe sometimes, we're wanting our spirit name, our colors, our clan, right? Again, we'll go and find that person that can travel to go and get that for us. No, how are you giving me? I've come to offer you, right? If you ever watching that at a pipe ceremony, when we pray with that sacred pipe, when we pray with that, they say that smoke that rises from that pipe through that tobacco, They say that's our prayers going straight to Creator, yeah, through that tobacco. Yeah? That's like me picking up my cell phone, giving God a call, right? But anytime we ask for something, we always offer tobacco. Maybe we're going to build a lodge, a sweat lodge out on the land somewhere. Right? But before we clear that area where we're going to build that lodge, we'll take a little bit of tobacco. We'll ask first, and then we clear that area. Right? Once we've cleared that area, we go and look for those willows we're going to use to build that lodge. But before we cut that first willow, again, we'll offer a little bit of tobacco. We'll ask first, and then we cut them. We come back to that area where we're going to put that lodge. We dig those holes in the ground, but in each hole, we'll put a little bit of tobacco. We'll ask Mother Earth to carry that lodge in a good way. We'll ask first. After we build that lodge, we go and get the grandfathers that we're going to use, right? But before we load them onto the truck, we will again, we'll take a little bit of tobacco. We'll ask first, and then we load them on. We come back and we get that sweat lodge area ready for our actual sweat, right? We make that bed. We put those grandfathers on top of that bed, however many we're going to be using. But for each of those grandfathers, we'll put a little tobacco. We'll ask them to come and help us, to come and heal us, to come and guide us, right? We'll ask them through that tobacco. And then we put the wood on, and then we light that fire. After about an hour and a half, 2 hours, those grandfathers, they're red hot, they're ready to come and do that work. We're ready to go in. But before each of us will go in, we'll take a little bit of tobacco, we'll go back to that sacred fire, and we'll go and ask for whatever it is that we're going into that ceremony for, right? Maybe my relative, maybe they're sick in the hospital, maybe they're incarcerated, right? They can't come to ceremony. So maybe I might go in for them. Yeah, I'll go and ask for them, right? Or else maybe it's for myself. I'll ask, whatever it is I'm going into that lodge for. Anytime we ask for something, our hunters in our communities, some of them, they still do that today. Before they go out hunting, right? They'll take a little tobacco, they'll ask for it. And they'll ask to be successful because maybe their families are dependent upon them, right? So they do everything within their power to have that success, right? Sometimes when we travel today, I'll drive up to Thompson, up north in northern Manitoba. But before I leave home, I'll put a little tobacco out, right? I'll ask for that safe journey. Yeah, I got a lead foot, right? Sometimes I drive a little fast. So I'll ask for that safe journey, right? Through that tobacco. So anytime we ask for something, we always offer that tobacco. That second teaching that comes with this medicine is when we give thanks. Anytime we give thanks, we always offer that tobacco. So what I mean by that is, when we come out of the sweat lodge, for example, as soon as we come out of that lodge, the first thing we'll do, we'll go and grab a little bit of tobacco again. We'll go back to that fire. Miigwech, thank you for whatever it is we may have received in that ceremony. We offer that tobacco. That hunter, he makes that kill, but before he butchers that animal, he'll take his tobacco again. Miigwech, thank you. You'll say to that spirit, right? Because that animal, that moose, it gave up its life so that we can have life. And for that, we say miigwech, we say thank you, right? Get up to Thompson again in that, right? Before I get into town, might stop the car, go in the bush a little bit and put a little bit of tobacco on. Miigwech, thank you. I made it safely, right? I didn't even get a speeding ticket this time. Right? So anytime we ask for something or when we give thanks, that's the teachings that comes with this medicine over here, those two teachings. So sage, cedar, tobacco. That fourth medicine we use that's most common to us is this medicine over here, that sweetgrass medicine. And one of the teachings that comes with this one, this is that kindness medicine. When you light sweetgrass, it has that sweet, gentle aroma to it, right? But this is that medicine we use to invite kindness in our thinking about others, ourselves, about life, to invite kindness back into our body, back into our spirit. To make a whole braid like this, usually we'll use 21 strands to make a braid. We'll divide them into 7, 7, and 7. These first 7 over here, they represent those 7 generations behind us. Our parents, our grandparents, our great-grandparents, 7 generations. Who we are, what we are, is because of them. They're the ones that made the trails already that we've been walking. And sometimes maybe they didn't do a good job. Sometimes some of them, maybe they did a lousy job. But again, the old people, they remind us, if anything, they gave us life, and at least for that, we need to be thankful. But they're the ones that made all the trails already, and that's what those first seven represent. Anishinaabe, the old people, they tell us today when we pray to our ancestors, sometimes that healing takes a little longer to come. And the reason they say is because those old trails, they've been disturbed. And what they mean by that is that we put up dams today, right? That river used to flow that way, but now that river flows this way, where that trail used to be. Maybe there's a big lake there now, where that trail used to be, a concrete highway, a town, a city where that trail used to be. So when we call on them to come and help us, to come and heal us, they come right away, but then they get to that obstacle. So now they got to navigate a different way to come and help us. And that's why they say sometimes it takes a little longer for healing to come. But that's what these first seven over here represent. Those next seven, those next seven over here, they represent those seven sacred teachings that we all hear about: love, respect, honesty, humility, courage, wisdom, and truth. Again, the Chanishina, the old people say those teachings, you know what? They're very simple. Love, right? Doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that one out, right? Nothing complicated about it, right? They're simple teachings. They say that those teachings are powerful. Respect, very powerful teaching. That teaching alone is very powerful. They say that those teachings are beautiful. Humility. When I can understand that, you know what, I'm no better than any of you sitting in here today, right? But none of you is any better than me either. Regardless the color of our skin, regardless what we believe in or don't believe in, regardless where we sit on that totem pole of life, every evening that sun goes down to the west of us, right? And when that sun goes down, we're all still going to be human beings. And when we can accept that, when we can understand that, that's what makes those teachings powerful and beautiful. The other thing they say about those teachings is that we don't walk them every day. Love, Love, is just a four-letter word, right? But when we show that love, when we demonstrate that love, when we walk that love every day, that's what makes those teachings powerful and beautiful. The last thing they say about those teachings is, how can I love you if I don't first love myself? How can I respect you if I'm not even respecting myself? How can I tell you the truth if I'm not even willing to tell myself the truth? So what they mean by that is that those teachings always have to start from within. But that's what these seven over here represent. The last seven, those ones represent those seven generations ahead of us, our children, grandchildren, great grandchildren, seven generations ahead. Why are those ones important? Well, what we do to her, Mother Earth, is one day going to affect them. Right now, she gives us everything and anything that we can possibly need and want to have this life. But if we don't look after her, what's going to be left for them, right? Sitting in a circle many years ago, this elder, he asked us, he said, what if today on Mother Earth, he said, what if all the four-legged, the winged ones, the crawly ones, he said, what if they all died today? What would happen to us human beings? Well, we would suffer too, right? We would suffer too. And then he asked, he said, what if all the grasses, the weeds, the flowers, and all the trees on Mother Earth, what if they all died today? What would happen to us human beings? Well, eventually we too would die. And then he asked, he said, what if all the lakes, the ponds, the creeks, the rivers, the oceans, and everything that lives in those ones, he said, what if they all died today? What would happen to us human beings? And again, the answer is very obvious, that we too would die. And then that elder, he asked us, he said, okay, well, take a moment and imagine this, he said. What if today, just like that, he said, what if today all the human beings died, he said, on Mother Earth, what would happen? Nothing, right? Nothing would happen. In fact, Mother Earth would probably get healthier again. But what that teaching teaches us, it's us that needs her. She doesn't need us, but we need her, right? And that's what those seven represent. That circle that's around me, is that the same circle I want to pass on to those next generations? Especially if my circle involves alcohol abuse, drug abuse, family violence, lying, stealing, cheating. Is that what I want to pass on to them? And sometimes it's going to be up to us to break those cycles, right? To break those cycles and hopefully to replace them with something healthier. But that's, again, that's what those seven represent. we bring those together and we make this one braid. Yesterday, today, tomorrow, mind, body, and spirit, man, woman, child, man, woman, Gijemandu, creator, right? But anyways, when he was born, I made my son a very special promise. And I promised my son that we would not cut his hair until he was 7. So we did that 11 years ago. My son just turned 18 this past summer. I cut my hair same time. But when he was 4 years old, my son, he knew this teaching already. Because every morning as I'd get him ready for daycare, I would take time and I would braid his hair. And as I'd be braiding his hair, I would ask him, his name is Misko. I'd say, Misko, what does your braid represent, my boy? Sweetgrass? Oh, that's good. What does sweetgrass represent, my boy? Kindness? Oh, that's good too. And what does each of these 3 main braids represent on your braid? My mind. Yeah. What else? My body. Yeah. Okay. What's the third one? My spirit. Oh, that's good, Misko. That's good. What are you going to do today at daycare, Misko? Said, Dad, he said, I can be kind to my mind. Okay, good. What else could you do? Said, Dad, I can be kind to my body. Oh, that's good. What else can you do? Said, Dad, I can be kind to my spirit. Oh, that's good, Misko. What's going to happen if you do that, my boy? Said, Dad, I'll be strong. Yeah? And that's that second teaching that comes with this medicine. Is through our kindness that we're most strong, right? Anybody can go like this to somebody else, right? Anybody can use their words to put somebody else down, to hurt them. Anybody can do that. My other little boy, Zongade, when he was 3 years old, I pissed him off one day. Yeah? He looked up at me and said, Dad, I don't like you no more. Even a 3-year-old can hurt us with their words, right? But when we have somebody in our face trying to hurt us, trying to put us down, and to still be respectful to that person, to still love that person, to still be kind to that person, sometimes can take a lot of strength. Yeah? But that's what this medicine teaches us, right? My son Misko, like I said, he's 18 today. Yeah? I asked him just the other day if he remembered this teaching. He remembers it. Yeah? And one of the things I can say about my son, he's a kind young man, my son. Yeah? He doesn't abuse alcohol or drugs. Yeah? He's working hard. Yeah? And hopefully those are some of the things we were able to instill in him. Yeah? And one of those was this teaching right here. Anishinaabe, the old people tell us that our whole journey is intertwined within this braid. Yeah? Just like our whole journeys, you know, can be measured within this circle of life teaching that I shared with you this morning. Yeah? And our whole, and part of what they mean by that is like our whole journey is it begins over here with what we can't see, which are the roots that once belonged to these strands of sweetgrass, right? And what that represents is we all have roots on our mother's side, we all have roots on our father's side, and we all have roots in the community in which we grew up in. You know? And that's one of the roles we all have as parents, as grandparents, as aunties and uncles. We all have that role to teach our little ones who they're related to and where it is that they come from. That's important. That's very important, right? Because if you can imagine a tree without any roots, right, a little bit of wind will come, that tree is going to fall down. Yeah? So roots are very, very important. And it's up to us to teach our little ones where their roots are. Where is their roots connected to, right? So our childhood is written within this braid, our adolescence, our adulthood, and into elderhood. And our whole journey, our whole story can be written within this braid. Now, one of the things that happens to us sometimes though, along that journey we call life is something might happen to us, right? Something very traumatic. We might experience a great loss, maybe, or whatever, something major, right? And sometimes what happens, the old people tell us, is that we get stuck to that one thing, that one event in our life. And the thing they say is not to dwell on that too long, because if we do, they say, one of the things that can happen is that it can break us. It can break us if we just focus just on that one event, right? So they say that's why it's important that we not do that, that we focus on all the totality of life and that whole journey, and not to get stuck on that one event or two events or whatever many, right? So always to be mindful of that. Yeah? But these are some of the things that this one braid teaches us. Yeah? And one of the things I find, amazing for us as Anishinaabe people, as Indigenous people, none of this is written, right? This is not a book I'm reading to you, right? And it's amazing in that, how it is that we're able to share and able to learn and share with one another. And just from all those things that have been passed on to us, not only maybe by our own families, but other circles that we've sat around. Right? And I always find that amazing, right? That we're able to, be able to express and to be able to share all the things that we share. So I just wanted to mention that as well. So the last thing I wanted to share with you this afternoon before I turn it back over to Amanda is is this grandfather right here. I haven't talked about him yet. So I thought maybe to finish things off, I thought I would talk about this grandfather here and why he's at the center, why he's a little bit different than everybody else here. But anyways, this grandfather here, he represents that child. Yeah? And how at one time that child was at the center of all creation. Yeah? That's what we're told. Yeah? Those two parents, they both had a relationship with that child. Those grandparents on both sides, they all had a relationship with that child. Those younger and older siblings, they all had a relationship with that child. Those aunties and uncles, they all had a relationship with that child. Those first, second, and third cousins, they all had a relationship with that child. In fact, the whole community had a relationship with that child. And in return, that child had a relationship with each and every one of them. But here's what we know happened here on Turtle Island beginning just over 150 years ago through the Canadian government at the time and through the RCMP and through the churches. They came and they took that child from that sacred hoop, yeah, and they placed that child in that square institution we've come to know as the residential school. Yeah? And right from day one, they started to peel away from that child all of those relationships that that child had. And they began with that physical one, right? They took him 100 miles away, yeah? 500 miles away from his community, from his family, right? That bed where he slept every night, where he felt safe, yeah? Where he slept good. Yeah? All of a sudden, they put him into this dormitory with a bunch of other boys. Yeah? And where at night, as he'd try and sleep, he would hear some boys whimpering, some boys crying, some boys having nightmares. Yeah? Sometimes you'd even see that door open in the middle of the night. Yeah? You'd see a shadow walk to one of the beds, pick up one of those little boys and walk out again. Yeah? They took that boy away from his kitchen table where he ate breakfast, lunch, supper with his family, where they would talk about the day's events, right? And they put him into this mess hall and they put that strange food in front of him that he had never seen or eaten before. And sometimes that food would make him gag, sometimes that food would make him puke in it, right? And regardless of that, they still forced it down, right? They took him away from that bush where he played and ran around and learned how to climb and so forth. They took him away from that lake in front of his home where he bathed every morning, where he swam and even caught fish sometimes to put on the table. And they put him into this area and told him, you cannot leave this area here. And right from day one, they started to peel away from all of those relationships that he had had. That boy, he came in there with his beautiful long hair. Ah, you look like a savage, so they cut it. That boy, he came in there with his little sister. Your sister belongs on that side with the girls. You belong on this side with the boys. Catch you talking to her, and we will punish you. That boy, he came in there with his little brother. Your little brother belongs with the little boys. You belong with the big boys. Catch you talking to him, and we will punish you. That boy came in there knowing how to speak his Anishinaabe language. Ah, we can't understand that gibberish. Catch you doing any of that, and we will punish you. From now on, you're going to learn this new language. We call it English. That boy came in there knowing the ways of his people. Ah, that's devil worshiping. That's paganism. Catch you doing any of that, and we will punish you. From now on, you go to church in the morning, you go to church at night before you go to bed. You go to church every Sunday. Hmm? And after peeling away 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, some of them even 11 years, right? I met an elder just recently. She went when she was 4 years old. She came out when she was 18 years old. After peeling away all of those relationships until one day that boy looked in the mirror and he could no longer recognize who he had become. He could no longer remember where he had come from. And when that day finally came, they said to that little boy, go back now, go back now. I have a friend in that. He went to residential school in Saguin, First Nation, an hour north of Winnipeg. Yeah? Ironically, that's his home community as well. Yeah? That's where he was born. That's where he's lived most of his life. Yeah? But anyways, he was sharing in that how he would look from his second story bedroom window. He'd look across the river and he'd be able to see his mom and his dad's house. And if he was really lucky, he'd be able to see his mom and his dad working outside in the yard. 10 months out of the year, he was not allowed to cross that river to go and hug them. I can't imagine what that would be like, right? To be able to see somebody that you care about, that you love, but not even be able to go and touch them. Yeah? To me, that would be like torture, right? That would be like torture. Yeah? One day, that sister, that nun, she came to him and she said, today is a very special day. Can you tell me what day it is? I don't know, sister. I asked you, what day is it? I don't know. What day is it? I said, I don't know, sister. And the more he said, I don't know, the more upset she became. She got so upset at him that she beat the crap out of him. That night, as he was laying in the infirmary covered in the bruises that she had inflicted upon him, she came to him again and asked, what day is it? I don't know, sister. It's your birthday. He had never celebrated a birthday before that. He didn't know. I have another friend. He comes from a community in northern Manitoba called Brochet, Baronsland First Nation. Right? And if you look on the map, there's Brochet, Lac Brochet, Dooley Lake, and then Churchill. Right? So they're the three most northern communities. Yeah? But anyways, he was sharing how when he was a little boy, he got sent to Birtle Residential School, right, which is around the Saskatchewan southern boundary of Manitoba, about 500 miles away. That's where he went. Yeah? But anyways, he was sharing how when he was a little boy, he had this thirst. He wanted to learn. Right? He wanted to learn everything and anything that he could learn. Right? So he was one of those kids in school. You probably have known that kid too. Right? He's always having his hand up like that, asking questions. Right? One day he had his hand up, right, to ask a question, and that nun that from the front of at her desk in the classroom, she looked up at him and she said, "Charles, why do you always have your hand up? Are you stupid or something?" He never asked questions again. My friend, he's in his 70s today. He still will not ask. If he's experiencing or has a problem with something, he would ask for help because of those words she spoke to him. That's only 3 stories from 2 men. We multiply that 100 times, multiply it another 100 times, even another 100 times if we want. But then we begin to understand just a little bit why maybe some of our parents were the way they were, why our grandparents were the way they were. That had a lot to do with it. That had a lot to do with it. Put on top of that, colonization, right? The whole history of colonization. There's an area here in northern Manitoba, for example, near Churchill. It's called York Factory, right along the Hudson's Bay coast, right? But many years ago, right, these big wooden boats landed on their shores, and these big bearded men got off those boats. Yeah? But anyways, these men decided that they would stay around for a while. Not too long after, they started intermingling with some of those Cree women. And sure enough, some of them, they became pregnant, and soon these little blonde-haired, blue-eyed little babies were being born. And after being there for a couple of years, maybe 3 years and that, these bearded men, they would get back onto their wooden boats and they would go back to their families across the water, leaving these blue-eyed, blonde-haired little babies behind. What happens when you're different? You get picked on, right? Those women, they get ostracized, shamed, right? Because they had intermingled with that other, right? Today, to see, to witness what happened there, you don't have to go very far. You just have to go to some of those northern communities, like the Pasquia Cree Nation, Split Lake, Bonabanabe, Oxford House, or Norway House, or York Landing First Nation, right? And you can still see today elders, blonde hair, blue eyes. They're descendants of that era. They're still around. Put on top of that the reservation system, right? I'm a young man, I have a young family in that. I go and open my cupboards, they're empty today. What do? I'm a provider, right? So I go all over the reserve, but this year, for whatever reasons, I can't find nothing. Yeah? So now what do I got to do? Now I got to go and approach that little white man, right? And I got to approach him very gingerly, right? And I go up to him and I say, sir, I've been all over the reserve and I can't find nothing. Please, my family is hungry. Can I go off the reserve? And if he kind of likes you, right, or if he's in a good mood, he might take a piece of paper, scribble some words on it, and give it to you. Now you're allowed, right? They call that one the pass system, right? But I'm a grown-ass man. Why do I have to go and ask this little man permission just to feed my family, right? How humiliating, how degrading. Put on top of that, love has no boundaries, right? That woman on the reserve, she falls in love with that guy in town. He puts a ring on her finger. And as soon as he does that, she's lost all her rights. She even has to move off the reserve from her own home because he's not allowed to come and move in there, right? And she can't even collect that little $5 bill every year now. She's lost all her rights. Love has no boundaries, right? That man on the reserve, he falls in love with that woman in town, puts a ring on her finger, and just like magic, right? She gets to move on to the reserve. She even gets to go and collect that $5 every year. All of a sudden, she has all these rights. Something wrong, right? Something wrong with that picture. Put on top of that the 60s school, right? All these children that are being stolen from their families, from their communities, and put into non-Indigenous homes. Happened here in Manitoba, happened all across Canada. They were being placed into the United States, into Europe. I met a lady recently. She was placed up in New Zealand, right across on the other side. One of the things those children realized very quickly when they got to where they were being placed or adopted is that they were different, right? So soon they realized what happens when you're different because of the color of your skin. They weren't picked for basketball teams. They weren't invited to attend birthday parties, right? Because they were different. But our children are smart, right? And as they grew, they asked, they figured out, hey, I'm from over there. Right? Oh, I got family over there, blood family, right? You know what? They're going to welcome me and everything will be nice again. Right? And they would find their way, they would make their way back home. And at first, yeah, they were welcomed. But then soon, their family looked at them and thought of them, listened to them. They sounded very different. They had different ways of thinking, right? Those ones we call the apples, right? those ones. Yeah. So they didn't fit in over there, but then when they came home, they weren't also fitting in there too as well. Put on top of that, the child welfare system today here in Manitoba alone, we have over 9,000 Anishinaabe children, Indigenous children in care. Over 9,000. Put on top of that the justice system. We make 30-40% of that overall population, right? Not only in the youth centers, but also in the women's corrections, men's correction centers. Something wrong with that, right? Put on top of that the education system, the health system. Something wrong, right? When an Indigenous man who will go into emergency and he'll sit there for 70 some hours and nobody will even notice that he's deceased. Something wrong with that system, right? Something wrong. But those are systems in that, right, that affect us every day, that have affected our families, our relatives before us even. And that's what we're dealing with today in our families, in our communities. But one good thing in that is we are resilient. We don't just lay down and give up. We've never done that. We have over 500 years of experience where we haven't just laid down and give up. And today we're getting stronger. We're getting stronger. We're going back and learning our ways. We're going back to ceremony. We're bringing out our tools, our drums. And we're getting stronger today. So last thing I just want to share, and before I hand it over to Amanda, I got a few more minutes, I think, definitely. Anishinaabe, they say it's hard to walk around this circle. It's difficult already. Life is difficult. But it's even more harder or more difficult when we try and walk it not being in balance. And what they mean by that is that it can happen to us anywhere along this journey, they say. Sometimes it can happen to us right here, before we're even born. Maybe that mother, maybe she brings stuff into her body. And today we hear our children, they're being born with fetal alcohol syndrome, fetal alcohol effects, right? When that happens, it can affect them. But maybe it's not even her, maybe it's him, right? Next thing we know, that child is born with head injuries, physical injuries. Maybe that will affect them the rest of that way. Sometimes we become unbalanced over here somewhere in this stage, right? And we know today that these are the ones that are the most vulnerable emotionally, physically, sexually. And when those things happen, they can affect that child the rest of that way. Sometimes we can become unbalanced over there somewhere, right? That boy, he moves from his community into the city, but because he wants that sense of belonging, that sense of protection, what does he do? He joins that gang. What do they do? Here, take this, right? What does he do? Pulls that trigger. Next thing we know, he's behind bars. Affects him the rest of that way. Sometimes it can affect us over here as adults, right? And today we see that some of our parents, they've forgotten what their roles and responsibilities are, right? And that's why we see these ones growing up in foster homes, group homes, institutions, because they're not being responsible. Today, sometimes I see our Indigenous men, they have children with that woman, children with that woman, children with that woman, but they don't take any responsibility, right? Because they're not in balance. They're not balanced, right? Sometimes we see it over here, in this stage. And unfortunately, sometimes we hear it's these ones over here, some of them, that are doing some of that victimization. We hear of that, right? Sometimes we even hear of it in our own ceremony. That lady, that woman, she'll come out of that lodge. That elder was touching me in there. Because some of our elders, they haven't done that healing yet. Right? They haven't done that healing right. But now they're running ceremony. Right? The key, the elders tell us to walk around this circle is to walk as balanced as we can. To walk as balanced as we can. Life is difficult already, but why try and walk it this way? Let's try and walk it this way. And that's what we're told, and that's what we're encouraged to do. So I think what I'll do is I'll leave it at there for now. And my mouth is starting to get dried out a bit. So I think one of the things I just want to ask you, though, like you may have some questions, and I'll try and answer if I can. But one of the things I would ask you to think about as part of your comments or your feedback is what's one thing that you might take away from today? What's one thing that you might take away from today in terms of something maybe that makes sense to you, right? That kind of thing. One of the things I always tell people when I share in this kind of way, I'm not here to shove anything down your throat, right? That's not my purpose here. My purpose is just simply to put it out here on the table, whatever, so to speak. And it's really up to you what you take away from this or what you leave behind. All of you today could go away thinking, you know what, that Wally guy, he was full of shit. That's okay too, right? Because again, I'm not here to shove anything down your throat. Simply my job is just to put it out here. And if you can use that, more power to you. So with that, I just want to ask again, like, is there something or something that kind of made sense for you or something that sticks out for you that you might be able to use? I wouldn't mind hearing that as well. So I'll turn it back over to Amanda. Yvette.
Wonderful. I'm going to try to hopefully not get too much feedback. How's my audio? Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so I didn't see any questions in the chat. There's a lot of people saying thank you. Some comments about their similar teachings in families. And right now, I guess we'll open up the floor to anybody who would like to unmute themselves and ask a question. Or you can put the question into the chat and I can ask it for you. I see Darlene is unmuted.
Hi, Wally. I really enjoyed your presentation and your knowledge. It was really, really good to feel regrounded and reconnected. It's hard to do that in the urban center. You have to kind of push away all of the stimulants that are here, right? And you got to really hang on to them. I think when I learn all this stuff and I keep reconnecting to it the way I was taught, the way you were taught, how do we draw family into it that are reconnecting and they're, getting away from, addictions and stuff like that? How do we use these teachings? Because some of them were raised the same way. And how do we try to gently support them while they're learning? I know it's a big question, but what's your experience?
So just listening to you on that, a couple of things come to mind. Number one in that is opportunity, right? What I mean by that is when we're able to create opportunities for people, for others to come and learn, I think is part of the key in there. Right? Because again, when I was growing up here in Winnipeg, in my own community, there wasn't a whole lot of opportunities, right, to learn about who I was or hear some of those teachings and so forth. So I think that's number one in that, is to create those opportunities for people. And, and hopefully by creating those opportunities, some people can latch onto that or grab onto that and be able to take away something, right, to help themselves. Second thing I was thinking about as I'm listening to you also in that, definitely not to be judgmental. In the sense in that the community I grew up in my own little community was very Christian based, a very Christian based community in that. But I was very fortunate in that my kuku, my great grandmother, she didn't have blinders. She never had blinders. Her peripheral vision was like this always, and meaning that she took me to those gospel meetings in my community and that, right? Even though she was a devoted Catholic, she still took me to gospel meetings in my community. Today, I love listening to gospel music. Yeah, I just feel good when I listen to gospel music. But my cuckoo, she also took me to ceremonies. Yeah? Uh, Outside our community, right? I went to shake tent ceremonies and other types of ceremonies. She'd sometimes go and see a medicine person in that, right? For her own doctoring, whatever. And that. So I got to witness that as well. Okay? So in growing up in that setting in that, one of the things that's been important to me in that is not to be judgmental to others. They might have a different belief than ours, but you know what? If that works for that person, more power for that person, right? More power to that person. In that. So that was the second thing I thought about, was not to be judgmental. The third and last thing I'd like to say is uh, we have to get away from the rules. We set up too much rules in terms of how things are supposed to happen, how we're supposed to conduct, ourselves, or how others are supposed to conduct themselves. And my experience or my example with that is, especially when ceremony, right? At sweat ceremonies, for example. Um, and again, unfortunately, sometimes we witness that somebody will not sit properly, or somebody will cross, over that uh, doorway in that fire, maybe, or else somebody will come there and they drank 2 days ago, whatever, like stuff like that. Like, we seem to have rules in terms of around that. My thing always in that is that, you know what, as long as those people are coming with respect, right? Because who am I to say to that person, you sat wrong, or you did wrong, or you shouldn't be here if you drank a day or two ago? Who am I to be that person, right? Because that person might need that ceremony at that time. And if I'm being harsh to that person, or being too, authoritative, whatever, then that person might get turned away. They may never want to come back wanting to learn, right? So the way I look at that is, we're all just learning, and we need to open those doors, and we need to invite, and we need to be able to invite. So that's kind of how, as I'm listening to your question, hopefully that answers it a little bit. You got you?
That was helpful. Thank you.
Sorry. Ani, Wally, just a quick question. Well, first of all, I want to say miigwech to Amanda and you for taking the time to do this. And I want to say hello to all the other women and men that have shared with Wally. It's really nice to sit with everybody for a couple hours. I mean, I'm no elder, as you know, and I've had a lot of friends ask me if I would come and smudge their apartment or their home. Now, is it okay for me to do this if I'm not an elder?
That's your question? That's your question?
Yeah, that's the main question. But if
By all means, yes.
oh,
Uh, um, that would be my answer to that, right? Um, I know way younger people who are way wiser than I am. Just by sitting with them, by listening to them. I know way younger people than that are more spiritual than I am. So to put an age or to put a title, sometimes for me personally, and this is just me personally, I try and stay away from that, because again, some people have tried to say to me, or identified me, or labeled me an elder, but I don't feel I've earned that right yet. Personally, myself. Myself, I prefer that shkabe. And if you think about a shkabe in ceremony, that's that fire keeper, right? That's a shkabe. That's that person that chops all the wood. That's the person that gets the wood, brings the grandfathers, right? That's a shkabe. The shkabe is the one that preps all the meal. The shkabe is the one that serves the elders first, right? Those are all shkabes. But they're doing it in a ceremonial way, right? From here, right? That ceremony, that's being in ceremony. And uh, so with that, like that's how I like to see myself, in terms of, if somebody's going to label me, you know what, if you want to label me, label me a shkabe, a helper, right? Because again, when I'm doing this, or when I'm in a circle with others and that, or when I'm teaching, or when I'm doing ceremony, I always try and do it from here, in a ceremonial way. Right? Anishinaabe, the old people tell us that all of life is a ceremony. We need to treat all of life as a ceremony, from the time we wake up to the time we go to bed, right? So in that sense, that's what we've been doing for the last 2 hours now. We've been in ceremony already, yeah? In this setting here, right? So to answer that, again, like for myself and that, is if you're coming from here, why you're going to help somebody, to help them cleanse their space, more power, right? More power to you in that sense.
Now,
So
Wally, is there anything that I should or shouldn't do? Like if I speak up, should a window be open?
you know what? Again, like everybody has different
Different?
teachings. I've never heard that. Everybody has different teachings. One of the things I've heard though, especially with this pandemic happening and that, is how when we smudge our space and that, how it kills all that bacteria. I've heard that lots, and I honestly believe in that. But one of the things I always also believe in smudging in that is it creates or it heals the spirit as well, right? I know for myself personally, anytime I smudge in that, I just feel way, way better after. Just like, I'm cleaning something, just like, I'm taking a bath or washing my face or whatever. I always feel that way. With smudge. So I'm always encouraging in my work environment. We have like 16 or 17 physical separate offices here in Winnipeg as an organization. And I always encourage our staff, begin your morning by smudging, right? And what you're doing in that is whatever negativity you may have picked up last night, don't bring that to work, right? Come start off fresh, right? But I also encourage them to smudge also at the end of the day, right? Because whatever happened at work during the day, you know what? Your family gave you to us for 8 hours. Now they deserve you, right? 100%. Yeah. So you shouldn't take anything back home with to them, right? So cleanse that out, leave it here, go home, be with your family, 100%.
Only just one more little question. If I see things in the home or apartment that I feel that would be making their space negative, should I tell them or just smudge and should I tell them or only if they ask me?
I think you'll know, right? Most times, yeah, most likely if they ask you that. Again, for myself and that, I sense stuff sometimes.
Yeah.
Uh, uh, Very rarely will I see anything. Anytime I've seen anything, it's always been at the Sundance.
Okay.
I've never seen anything in the lodge, like a sweat lodge, for example. But then, you get vibes, right? You get vibes from others as well, too, in that. And I'm always conscious of that. I'm always mindful of that. But sometimes I kind of leave it for myself in terms of what does that mean, right? What does that mean for me? Why I experienced that or why I saw that? Sometimes it might be just a self-teaching, right? A teaching that's trying to come, and it's up to me again to be open, right? Um, One of the things I just want to share with all of you, right? Just very quickly, in that sitting in a lodge many years ago, in that. The doors were closed. It was pitch dark in the lodge and that. There was a whole bunch of us inside the lodge. And we were singing some songs and that. And then out of nowhere, this young man, he asked this elder inside the lodge, the conductor, he asked him, how am I going to know if I have a vision? He said. And that was his question. How am I going to know if I have a vision? So the elder, the person guiding the lodge in that, the sweat lodge holder, he said to the young man, he said, can you close your eyes? He said, yeah, because we're supposed to have our eyes open even though it's pitch black, right? Are they closed? The young man replied, yeah, they're closed. Okay, imagine yourself you're in the forest. Can you do that? Yes, said the young man. Okay, he said, look at those tall, straight trees. Let's imagine that you're, all surrounded by tall, straight trees. He said, can you see those trees? The young man replied, yeah, I can see them. Now look, he said, they're covered in all really luscious green leaves. He said, can you see those leaves? Can you hear them? Yeah, the young guy said, yeah, I can do that. And then he said, now look beyond those trees. He said, look at that blue sky up there. He said, yeah, look at that blue sky. Just clear, he said, above those trees. Can you do that? Young man said, yeah, I can see that. Yeah. And the elder said, you just had a vision. You just had a vision, right? But the teaching behind that is we have visions throughout the day, yeah? But sometimes we don't recognize them, or we're not open to recognizing it, right? So again, it's about being mindful, right? Some things come to us, we experience some things in that. We may think it's for somebody else, right? But it's important that we ask first, was that meant for me? Me alone, maybe, right? And once we figure that out, right? And we figure out, well, that was meant for those others, whatever, then maybe we might tell them, right? Or find a way, right? So long way to answer part of that question, hopefully, would be that way. Miigwech.
Language.
Thank you, Paula. One typed question that we had is from Sharon. She had a question. Is there any change that happens if the fetus only spends 8 months in the womb?
I have no idea, unfortunately. And I think that probably comes just again, like, I've learned lots being a father 8 times. But again, I haven't learned everything I needed to learn or wanted to learn in that, unfortunately not. So I'm not sure. One of the only things that one of the ways I can answer that to it, I guess maybe, is I believe anyway, that as Indigenous people, we've always looked at that fetus being special, right? Being a special something, whether we call that human being or spirit or whatever we might want to call that, whatever. But that's a gift. That's a gift from Creator, the great mystery, or however again you want to identify that. But again, as far as the question in terms of like, is there something or a difference or whatever at 8 months? That part I could not definitely answer. I wouldn't even attempt to answer that. Sorry.
Yeah, I think that was a good answer still. Another question that was typed is it possible to be given your name, clan, and colors if you are asked to say where you sit in the medicine wheel?
Can you repeat that again?
Is it possible to be given your name, clan, and colors if you're asked to say where you sit in the medicine wheel?
Oh, so I'm just wondering, like, what's that related to in terms of what stage you're in that medicine wheel, whether you're a male or female, or whether you're being asked, do you fit over here as a two spirit? I'm not sure if that's how that question is intended in that. Um, um, my son, as soon as he was born, we were visiting this elder and his family in their home in that, and just having a regular visit, for example, in that, and in the evening, and we were all interacting, talking, whatever. The elder said, "Your son's name just came to me." He said, "Yeah, your son." And my son was just a tiny little baby, and so he named him. He named him. Kanigani Gabwe, the one that stands at the front. Um, so that came, just in somebody's living room, just us having an evening together visiting. But it was somebody I respected as well too in that way because he walked a traditional way. But in my own experience for myself in that, the first time I ever went to a lodge was in 1979. And off and on, because my path was kind of like that, off and on, I would go to ceremonies and so forth, and I would go and help. Sometimes I'd go and participate and so forth. But anyways, about 15 years ago, so much later from 1979, 15 years ago, I went to a sweat ceremony in Sagging First Nation, and I went in as normal because I'd been there many times before that. But for whatever reasons, this time around, I decided, I found myself passing my tobacco to the conductor, to that elder and that, and I asked him, can you gift me or can you give me my spirit name, my clan, and my medicine colors? Yeah? And uh, so we closed the doors. We had about 2 rounds in that. But anyways, on the third round, when the door opened, he said to me, he said, your name came, he said, yeah? Bimashigi knew, soaring eagle, he said, yeah? Mangagi to them, you belong to the Loon clan. Red, white, yellow, and blue. Those are your medicine colors, he said, yeah? But as soon as he told me that, I felt complete. Yeah? I can't say in words or describe, but the best way is I just felt complete. Yeah? Um, that it's as if something or a part of me had been missing and I didn't even know. Yeah? And all of a sudden, I just felt complete. Yeah? Um, so again, I'm not sure what the context of that question the person's asking in that sense, but we can receive our name anytime around that circle. It shouldn't matter like if we're a woman, man, or self-identify as being a two-spirit, whatever. That should not matter, I don't think, or I don't believe anyway. Um, but one of the things I always tell people, if you're going to go and ask for your name, your clan, whatever, to ask for all of it all at the same time, right? Meaning in that if you only go and ask for your name and you offer that tobacco, you might just get just your name, right? And then you have to go through the whole process again of wanting to find your clan and your colors and so forth, right? So I always tell people ask for all three right away, right? Because they may not tell you, right? The first time, right? So that's one of the advice I always give people when they're going out to ask for that. But one of the things in that is, when I started today, after I sang those 3 songs, the first thing I did is I introduced myself. And the reason for that is because we're told all of us have helpers. We all have guides, right? But sometimes my helpers, they might be halfway around the world. They might be halfway across the universe. But as soon as I speak that name, right away my helpers are right here guiding my words, right? Because I am only a human being. And sometimes my words might come out the wrong way, right? And it's not my intent to misguide you or to hurt you, right? So sometimes I need help too. So that's why we always call on them to come and guide those thoughts and those words. So I'm not sure if I answered that for you or not. Yeah.
She has a follow-up question.
Yes.
Andy, did you want to unmute? You Oh, there you go.
Ani Bujo,
Bonjour.
Wendy Indigenous, Musko Mexique, Endow, Indigenous,
Ah,
Mississauga,
bonjour.
Credit, Endow,
Bonjour.
Mekanak, Bodem, and Anishinaabe, Endow.
Ah, bonjour.
Bujo. Yes, I'm in a group, and it doesn't apply to me because I have my clan. I know my name and everything. But the facilitator has asked the participants, Indigenous and non-Indigenous alike, to offer up tobacco to them and a gift to be given
Ah,
their names,
okay.
their clans, if they can
Okay.
say what color quadrant they sit in, whether they sit in the red, whether they sit in the black, whether they sit in mix, white, black, red, white, yellow, red,
Mm,
whatever.
oh,
And I just think that's kind of strange. I've never heard of it.
mm,
So I thought I would ask you, is that a thing?
mm.
Like,
Okay. Mm,
it's almost like they're asking you or the participants to say whether or not they're white, they're black,
mm,
where they fit.
mm, mhm. All right. So I think one way for me to answer that is one, I've never heard that before.
Me?
Two is that again, it's important that we not force, right? Others to make a decision that they may not be ready for, right? And it's only us that'll know when we're ready, right? Meaning again, like just the example, even though I had gone to a lot of ceremonies, a lot of different places, it wasn't until much later that something came to me and I offered that tobacco and I asked, right?
Yes.
So there's that part. The third part in that is, again, just, to remind us that maybe that person has different teachings, right? Why they're coming at it in that sense. Right? So no easy answer in that sense, but one, I never heard about it. And two, we shouldn't force, right? At least that's my own personal.
Yes.
And that, to wait for people to be ready for when they need to do that or when they feel that they want to do that.
Yes. Yeah. Because when I received my name, I was in a sweat, and the facilitator just kept saying, "Much commence clay, much commence clay," and nobody was answering because no one knew at the time why she was saying just that. And all of a sudden, she said, "Wendy," and I was like, "Yes." She said, "That's the grandmothers are coming through with your name. That's your name." They showed red lightning bolts and then shot down your name.
Yeah.
And everybody in the sweat, we all started to cry because and I was the only one that day that received my name. I went there not asking, not thinking I was going to come out with one. But yes, I didn't think that was a thing, and I thought it was kind of strange, but I just wanted to get clarity because I was kind of dumbfounded when.
Rich, well, thank you for asking.
Absolutely. Miigwech.
Miigwech.
Thanks, Wendy. Another question that was just typed, Brandy asked, or she said, I have a lot of friends that are interested in our culture but are very shy of asking to attend or participate in our communities. I know our culture includes about the yellow, black, white brothers and sisters from other nations in our teaching. What is a good way to encourage and invite them to learn with us?
Good question. Feast, number one. Anytime we have food in that is a good time to invite others in that to come and share in that food in that, and that's a good opportunity again for us, maybe to incorporate or share some teachings. One of the things though for me in that that's important in that is if I'm going to share something of myself in that, it's nice when that other person is able to share a little bit about themselves as well too in that, and that's one of the ways we learn, right? That's one of the ways we create that acceptance and so forth. One of the things, in regards to reconciliation, this is what I hear here in Manitoba a lot, in all aspects and that. And again, I just heard it the other day. We have an organization here that looks after our homeless people, but then they got called out in that, in terms of not being able to provide those opportunities, especially to those Indigenous people that come and access those services. So they answered to that, and by how they answered to that, a couple of things. The executive director resigned, the board chairperson resigned, and there's a whole switch happening. And the new person that came on in that reported that, they're going to start focusing on reconciliation, right? And, feels good to hear that, right? But with that, I thought there was one thing missing yet, and that was truth, right? Truth and reconciliation. We can't have reconciliation until we've had an opportunity to speak our truth, right? To have our truth be listened to, right? So again, I think in any circles in that, it's all about, we're all just learning again, and it's good to invite others to learn too. And one of the things I'll be talking to you about second or third session in that is the idea, I'm going to do that turtle teaching with you, which will explain some of that as well, in terms of those other 3 tribes as well. And I do that sweat lodge teaching, I'll do that with you a little bit later as well, next session or a couple of sessions down. And again, that one also speaks to those other 3 tribes. And there's 4 tribes, right? We're that red nation in that, but there's 3 other nations in that make up that global family, right? So we can't neglect that, right? And but also at the same time, it's not only just our job as Indigenous people to reconnect those relationships. And yes, we have a role, but everybody else has a role too. So that's and part of the role for me anyway, personally, and where I work, and one of the things we do as an organization. Anytime somebody comes in terms of reconciliation, our job, our role, to remind them, hey, you forgot the truth. So that's one of the things we've been doing.
Yes, the truth, very important. Yeah, if anyone else has a question, you're more than welcome to unmute yourself. I don't see any more questions in the chat.
I'm just curious, Pam, where are you from? I've been watching you all this afternoon.
Oh, my white hair. I'm registered with the Sweetgrass First Nation. Yeah, in Saskatchewan.
Oh.
Yeah. My dad's from there. And my mom is from Soto, which is probably you know, when you're on the prairies and you look out far, like just right over there, like probably a half an hour drive from each other. Yeah. So I never grew up on the reserve though. My mom moved away, and for whatever reason, she didn't want us to grow up there as kids, to grow on the reserve. So I grew up in the city. And consequently, because my mom ended up being a single parent of us 6 kids, I didn't grow up with my culture. Like that's, you know, so I've been learning about it, or getting connected to it actually in the past 20 years, and more so in the past 10 years. It's been really intensive for me. Yeah. And yeah, I appreciate you asking, but yeah.
No, just that you've been on the screen here the whole time and that, because I can't see everybody. Not everybody's on the screen with me in that. At one point, I think there was like 45 of you in that.
Yeah.
But you've always been right from the beginning on the screen in that. And then the other one, Irene, you were just laughing like crazy just a while ago. How are you? Where are you from?
You're on mute, Irene.
Yeah.
I'm from the Kisagoose Band in Saskatchewan,
Bonjour.
but I grew up in Winnipeg, and my brother is a co-founder of APTN.
Oh, right on. Awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, welcome. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No, I just noticed you're in my screen too here and that, and you're just laughing away hard earlier. You got. So before we kind of notice we're kind of getting towards the end, my next session with you or anybody that's wanting to come in is, I can't remember the date.
March 5th will be the turtle teaching.
Yeah. So on March 5th, aside from the turtle teaching, I'm going to finish this teaching here because I didn't finish it today. So on March 5th, what I'm going to do with whoever joins us is I'm going to take you on my own personal journey. Because remember, I finished off with that we can become unbalanced, right? So what I want to do next time we come together is I want to take you on my own journey. So that'll be a big part of the next time we come together. And again, also I want to do that turtle teaching with you as well too. Yeah. So
if anybody would like to be added to our mailing list, I usually send out the next week's worth of upcoming events every Friday. Or I try. I'm hoping to send out next week's events today. They're starting to show up on Facebook already, so you can go there. I shared the link earlier in the chat. But if you'd like to be added to our mailing list, you can email me at the admin@anish email, or just drop your email address in the chat box to me directly, and then I'll add you to our list, and then you won't miss Wally's upcoming sessions.
Hi, Wally.
hi.
This is Charlene. I just had a question about, I like the way you display the rocks there, like the medicine wheel.
Yeah.
Like, can other people use that? Like, say if I liked it, can I use that to put the rocks out the way you did? Or is that stealing your stuff?
Good question. Good question. And I'm glad somebody asked. You know what? This doesn't belong to me. This belongs to all of us, right? So by all means in that, if you want to use it, or, you know, I don't have copyright on any of this. It belongs to all of us in that. Actually, I'm doing a 2-day session with people in the Yukon. coming up next month as well too in that. And what they're doing is they're making their own, and we're going to spend 2 days, them sharing back to me, because I've done this with them for 2 days already before. So now this next one in that with them is they're going to come back and they're going to share with me some of their teachings, right? And some of their own life stories as well too in that. So by all means, this doesn't belong to me. It belongs to all of us.
And is there a certain amount of rocks in each color?
That's up to you again, right? That's
Okay.
up to you. And what you'll notice in that is I use these 9 here simply because they represent that first 9 months. I have 28 all the way around, 7 red, 7 white, 7 orange, yellow, and 7 blue. I use blue because that's my medicine color. That's why I have blue on here. But if you put those together, there's 28 of these. Down the center here, starting with this grandfather to this grandfather, there's 13 here, right? Which represents those 13 moons. And it takes 28 days to travel around, right? That's how I just, that's how this came to me. And that's why I do it the way I do it in that.
I like it.
Yeah,
Thanks.
But that was a real good question there, eh? Because it's important, I think. And I think, again, like I said at the beginning with that Sundance teaching, this doesn't belong to us. And that's why we share, right? That's why we share. The only thing I always watch for in that is, not to twist that, right? And what I mean by that is, when people, take it and use it in a different way, kind of. That's the only thing I'm always afraid of. But again, I have no control, right? I have no control. But that was a good question, Miigwech.
Cheryl, you have a question?
Cheryl, this is Cheryl. Miigwech for your presentation, Wally. And I wish you were my grade 9 to 12 history teacher when I was in high school, because going to high school I hated history class because the teachings there of our people were not what we should have been taught, right? This is what we should have been taught, kind of. So one of my questions is, in my journey right now, I'm a 48-year-old woman in my culture, finding healing, and it's brought me back to my culture to learn the language and to learn the history. And this is what brought me today. I think you were on my path to Zoom in. I was given this email not as you have to attend the Zoom meeting. It was more or less, a friend gave it to me saying, I think you would like this presentation. So I think it was gifted. Your presentation was a gift to me today, and that's what I'm going away with. One of my questions is, what was a challenge for you learning this and trying to teach it? Like, did you come across people? And I'm glad you said, like, whatever way you do it, or if you know it's the right way, or there's no, people might do things differently. And I think that's one of the challenges in our communities and within ourselves, is trying to find that right way. But yet we know in our heart, like you said, that it's right, that you feel it, right? But I just want to know, going in your history of walking your path, because some people will come across, that's not how you do it. That's the wrong way. And I think that discourages a lot of people from trying to do and learn. And that was one of the challenges growing up for myself in the community is, you can't do it that way, or you shouldn't do it that way, or that's not how you do it. And I think going forward, now that I'm a 48-year-old woman, I'll seek whatever kind of way and know that the feeling that comes across that, okay, I know this is, So I just want to know, in your walk of journey of doing all this, how did you respond to people when they said that to you, if they ever said that to you?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the ways I want to answer that is when I first started walking this way, and I was very fortunate that I ran into a person who's become my mentor in that. And one of the things he told me early on in that, he said, you know what, go to that ceremony over there, he said. But you know what, go to that one too. And go to that one, he said. And go to that circle over there, he said. And learn what you can learn, he said. And if you like something, he said, take it with you. He said, whatever you don't like, whatever doesn't make sense to you, whatever doesn't sit right with you, he said, just leave it there, he said. But take what you like, he said. And the reason he said is because that's one of the mistakes we make sometimes, especially when we're new on that journey of wanting to reclaim who we are, wanting to relearn who we are, is we just go to that one person, right? And his thing was, you know what? That person is only a human being. What if that person falls down one day, right? Then now you got nobody. Right? So I've always taken that to heart as part of my journey, as part of my learning experience in that, is I try and learn as much as I can from as many people as I can. And you know what, if something doesn't feel right for me, if something doesn't make sense for me in that, well, you know, I just leave that over there then, right? But I do take what I like and I try and, you know, use it in the best way that I can. So that's one of the things. But the second part to that question also in that, again, is the idea that, and part of this maybe is because of residential schools and that, is again, we need to get away from the rules, right? We're all relearning, we're all just learning, right? And especially our young people, right? And they don't need anybody, you know, scolding them or, you know, pointing them out and, you know, that kind of thing, or, you know, whatever, because they didn't do or say something in the right way. No, they don't need that, right? We're all just learning in that. So we have to be careful with that. But I think that comes from that residential school, right? You know, in terms of that strictness. Yeah? And I agree with our elders in the sense in that we have to have some strictness, but I think again we need to bring that kindness as part of that strictness. Eh? There's other ways we can say to somebody, to teach somebody. There's other ways we can do that as opposed to raising our voice at them, as opposed to, you know, putting them out there so that everybody else is, you know, they're feeling like, you know, they're being attacked, whatever. No, that doesn't help. Right? So I think maybe that's one of the ways I would answer that, is try and learn, you know, have people or encourage others to try and learn from as many people as possible, not just to learn from one. And number two in that is to be mindful how, you know, we uh, try and teach those things with others as well too in that, and to try and do that in that kind way, in the good way. Right? So hopefully that answers a little bit.
Yeah, Miigwech, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, maybe if there's one more question or no more questions. I'm not sure, I don't see any in the chat. I just want to remind everybody that today's session will be available on our website in a day or so, maybe after the weekend. I can put that in the chat again, and you're welcome to hear Wally's teaching again. If you would like to be added to our mailing list, I've gotten a bunch of emails already, but you can just shoot me a message or email me afterwards. But if I don't see any more questions, so maybe we'll finish up. Yeah, I'll do that. Sorry, I'm just checking some messages here. Thank you so much, Wally, for joining us. Wow, what great teachings. I'm always amazed at, you know, the content that comes, because it's like, as a planner, I know the teachings that are about to happen, but every time I hear it, I sit down and listen, it's always like I'm meant to be hearing what you're saying. And there's always an important takeaway, and I love that Creator brings us many different people to tell us all the things that we need to hear at, you know, key points in our life. So thank you so much. Oh, maybe we'll take one more. I see Pam unmuted her mic.
No question,
The
no.
last question.
Sorry.
Oh, no question? Okay. Okay, so yeah, I guess we'll finish off. Thank you so much, Wally. I look forward to seeing you again on March 5th, and then again later on I think you have 3 more sessions in March with us. So I look forward to that. Did you want to say some final words before we head out?
Myself?
Yeah.
Myself.
Perhaps you want to end with a song?
Yeah. You want a song?
I love hearing the drum music, and I know that it's a popular thing with our participants to
All right.
hear the songs.
So that's a good thing because we started in song, we should end in song. Okay?
Mhm.
So again, just stay where you are. Wendigo kabi bidigen, Wendigo kabi bidiga, hey ah hey ah ho, hey ah hey ah hey ah hey ah hey ah, hey ah hey ah hey ah hey ah hey ah, hey ah hey ah ho. Wendigo kabi bidige, Wendigo kabi bidiga, hey ah hey ah ho, hey ah hey ah hey ah hey ah hey ah, hey ah hey ah hey ah hey ah hey ah, hey ah hey ah ho. Wendigo kabi bidige, Wendigo kabi bidiga, hey ah hey ah ho, hey ah hey ah hey ah hey ah, hey ah hey ah hey ah hey ah, hey ah ho. Wendigo kabi bidige, Wendigo kabi bidiga, hey ah hey ah hey ah hey ah ho. A backward, contrary song, Wendigo kan song. We call it, eh? And again, I sing a ceremonial song. All the songs I've sang so far, they're all ceremonial. And like I said at the beginning, the reason is we have been in a ceremony, right? And what I mean by that is we've been doing things from the heart as we've come together today. So this last song, that Wendigo kan song, that contrary song, to bring our circle to an end. But here's the reason I sang that song, and you may be surprised to learn this, all of you, but you know what? You're not perfect. Right? Not any one human being is perfect. Only Creator is perfect, right? And because we're not perfect, after we leave here today, we still might say the wrong things. We still might do the wrong things, right? The worst thing when you realize that your words or your actions affected somebody in a negative way, the worst thing, waste of energy. The best thing we can do is when we realize that our words or actions hurt somebody, the best thing we can do is we can go back to that person, and from our heart, we can say to that person, I'm sorry. That's the best we could hope for, by taking that responsibility. So I leave you with that today as well, too. And nobody expects you to be perfect, so don't expect yourself to be perfect. So have a good day and have a good weekend, and hopefully I see some of you on March the 5th again. Miigwech.
Thank you. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Poma P.